All right, so the question now is LIV Golf going to be moving from 54 to 72 holes? And if so, I mean, they've kind of become like the kings of pivoting. Every time they run into like a brick wall, they kind of just try to pivot and try to make it work. This would be the biggest change that's come to the series yet, because you're talking about LIV. LIV is Roman numerals for 54. I mean, it's the name. It's so big in their like mission that they've made it the name of the series, LIV Golf 54.
Right.
To change it to 72. Yeah, you're going to change
LXXII.
Yeah, I mean, is that how far we go? But let's just bring you up to speed for anybody who, is wondering how we got here. First of all, we know the biggest hurdle right now for LIV has been getting official World Golf rankings. All of the players obviously are pushing for it. The series is pushing for it for two reasons. One, having official golf, world rankings is going to legitimize the series that much more, of course. So they, guys like Norman and they all want that. But the players, at some point, if they continue to play these what we call exhibition matches, if they continue to do that and they're not ranking up any points, they're going to continue to drop down. And as they drop off the official World Golf rankings, there's a lot of guys who may not have other exemptions from the majors. They're not going to be able to play the majors.
Right, they won't.
And so this is a huge key for them to get this. So we know recently one kind of the Hail Mary of the week for LIV was appealing to the MENA Tour.
Right.
Which
a tour we've never heard of.
Honestly.
There's so many tours out there.
There's a lot of tours out there. But what the MENA Tour has, that the same thing that they went to the DP World Tour for and all the other ones, is that they've got a system in place for official World Golf rankings. So they figure, hey, it's a win-win. You let our players play on some of your events. We will bring more attention to your events because of the big names that we would bring, and then you would bring us the points that we need.
Right.
Well, that ended up being, at least for now, another dead end.
Because of 54 holes. What's the reason?
And the reason that was cited was saying, if you're playing no cut, there's two parts of this. One is 54 holes, and the second is that it's a no-cut event. And we even heard in a press conference earlier this year, even Tiger Woods, who hasn't been, like a PGA Tour necessarily champion, like you see with some of the other guys like Rory and some of these guys who've really actively spoken out against LIV. I haven't seen that from Tiger, but the soundbite we got from Tiger was him saying, basically paraphrasing here, it's hard to take it seriously as competitive golf if it's only 54 holes and no cut.
Sure.
Right? All that has led to this moment now, and some tweets that hit today, just kind of surfacing about some reports that have been out there that LIV is now seriously considering moving to 72 holes and moving to a cut, and that this has been in the works since the Bedminster, New Jersey event. So the first tweet that we saw said, LIV is in advanced discussions about adding a cut to the Jeddah Invitational. I believe it'll be implemented. This is a major hurdle for world ranking points and would likely be enough for them to get awarded. So what LIV ultimately is doing is they're saying, well, what's the reason you're not giving us the points? Is it because the 54 holes in the cut? Well, if we make that change, then
are we good?
Are we good?
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's almost forcing the hand. If these other tours are using that as their excuse to not let LIV join, but they've got some other reasons, maybe it's the Saudi backing, it could be whatever. If LIV changes that and says, well, now we're 72 holes with cuts, what are you going to say?
Right.
It does force the hand of these other tours to do something.
Are there players that are actually, you think they've been sold like a bale of goods from Norman, that he's just telling guys, we'll get points, just sign, we'll get points, and now they're hitting all these hurdles and like, Greg, come on, man, like, what's up here? I
have no doubt in my mind that
I know some guys might be upset.
Norman, being the biggest, obviously, champion of the league, is probably saying, and I would imagine some of the conversations that happened behind the scenes, Norman probably even thought that he was going to get the points, maybe from like this MENA Tour or whatever. It just and even you heard quotes from guys like Phil. It's like, it just makes sense where, that these players. I think I have a quote here from Phil. He said, "I think for the World Golf rankings, this is a great way to keep credibility while not bringing politics into decision making. I think it's good for all parties." And that was him discussing LIV and the MENA Tour working together. So I do think that there's been a lot of people who are thinking this is going to happen and making those promises. The interesting thing for me, and what it really comes down to, is not just like the kind of the funny gaffe that it would be of having to change the whole name from 54.
Right.
But it's more so if you think about all the players who all, said or wanted to say that it wasn't about the money. And they said it was about the schedule being more appealing. less events and, only playing the 3 days instead of the 4 and getting to be with their families more. I get it. Now, I'm not going to knock anybody's decision to want to spend more time with their family. Now we're seeing, if this happens, one thing we've already saw is LIV is now adding a lot more events to the schedule for next year.
Not a lot, but there's some, right?
A handful. But over time, I don't.
But it's not a 45-week schedule like the PGA Tour.
Not yet. It certainly is not. But there's a few guys on the PGA Tour play 45 weeks anyway.
Right. But the schedule still exists. No one ever plays that.
Right. But guys on tour, some of the big names might put in 20, 25, something like that events.
Yeah, I think Cam put in 18 was the number.
Okay, so think about it like this. Let's say LIV moves up to 14 events in the season, 12 to 14 over the next 2 years. We're talking about expanding and adding more. If you take those 12 to 14 events, plus you take let's say you play in the 4 majors, now you're up to 18, almost 20 events that you're playing in. And then on top of that, if you go back and you're playing also 72, so you're playing 4 rounds, some of the guys, the case could be made that some of the guys who moved from the PGA Tour to LIV to try to play less are now just playing as much as they would have been if they were on the PGA Tour.
Right.
Because the difference with the LIV contracts is we've seen more and more of that roll out. The New York Times, I think, did a post about some of the leaks that they saw in some of these. Unlike the PGA Tour, there's more contracted, like with LIV, a lot of these guys are contracted. They have to be in the events. They have to
be there. Mm-hmm.
So what you could see is guys who moved over to LIV to play less golf are now playing 14, events a year, 72 hole events. They could be almost playing as much golf as they were before.
Yeah, and I got to think, honestly, it was about the money for a lot of them, whether they said it or not. So I think some of them are still going to be happy. There's a lot of them on tour who didn't like the PGA Tour politics, so they're still going to be happy that they're not there. I don't think adding another event or adding another round to the event is going to make guys like Pat Perez be upset. Right. I think he's still going to be happy. Where I think it's going to affect the guys is like a Phil or a DJ who was like, hey, I didn't really sign up for this. I would have stayed on tour. I would have I had all the money I needed, all this stuff. It might affect them. I'm curious to see how it plays out and if the events are going to keep stacking up year after year, 16, 20 events. Now, all of a sudden,
what it comes down to is how lucrative it is.
That's just it.
If it becomes lucrative enough, they're going to add more events to the season.
Right. I mean, look at DJ just won $18 million for being the top player of the year over, 6 events?
Right. But I mean, even like for the events and the hosts and depending on how they change their revenue model. But look at this. Like, for example, you've got a guy like Bryson DeChambeau. He's now down to 49th in the official world golf
50
ranking.
The cutoff for things?
It depends on the events.
Okay.
Some of them are 50. You got to be top 50 in the world. But you could see some of these guys that they could be itching a little bit, be like, yo, every week that I'm playing over here, now granted they've got fat pockets from it.
Right.
But every week that I'm playing over here, I'm dropping out of the official world golf rankings. So ultimately, there's 2 questions. One is like, do you think LIV should change their original position of being so hard up on this idea of 54 holes and no cut events? And originally, and if you go to their website, even the reason they cited the no cut events is they said they wanted spectators and fans to be able to see all their favorite players play.
Yes.
There wasn't anybody who was missing because they missed the cut. Okay. And then the other thing is like the 54 holes. So it's like, should they make that change? But the second question is, if LIV does make the big change and go to 72 hole events with a cut, at that point, do they get their official world golf rankings? At that point, has the ability to say no, leaning on the competitiveness, go away from things like the DP World Tour, the MENA Tour, whoever it may be? That's the big question.
Dude, it's a lot is going to happen in that case. Look at the team aspect, right? Let's say Taylor Gooch gets cut now. What happens to the team
how
points?
does the team work?
Like, how's it going to work? No one got cut. All their points mattered. I mean, look at Brandon Grace last week, for crying out loud. He withdrew and he made $120,000.
Right.
It's ridiculous. Like, they're going to have to change a lot of things.
Yeah, changing something as fundamental as the number of rounds and the cuts. You're right. It has to shake everything's
going to get shaken
because we talked about this previously on the podcast about how the point system works.
Right.
And you're right. If you all of a sudden had 2 guys out of a 4-man team that didn't make the cut,
they use everyone's cumulative score.
Right.
In order to make this number. So they're going to have to.
How does that work?
I don't know.
So what we could ultimately see is a major shakeup for LIV. But the question that I have for everyone out there, and you guys can weigh in the comments, is A, do you think this change will happen? But B, if this change happens, does this legitimize LIV for you anymore? Because that's the case that they're going to try to make. in their appeal for official World Golf Rankings is that this is the reason why you guys are saying we're not legitimate. So if we do it, are we legitimate at that point? I'd love to know what you guys think. So weigh in the comments, and we'll have to see it unfold.